Hi, welcome to the first week of week one of English 131, the second lecture. First lecture was just a basic syllabus lecture. In this talk, we're going to start thinking about writing our first paper and why we're talking about protest and thinking about what the importance of doing writing in protest is. So I want to start off by talking about the theme, writing protest, and why we're doing this theme. There are many, many themes we could do. I think I might have mentioned this in the introduction lecture. We could talk about fairy tales, or we could talk about games, or we could talk about gender, we could talk about the apocalypse. There are lots and lots of possibilities for writing. And sometimes in writing courses, in freshman composition courses, the focus is on the different kinds of tasks you'll do, or on the different kinds of genres you'll write in. Sometimes the focus is on just learning how to tell stories, or just learning how to develop arguments. Sometimes the focus is on very traditional and pretty outdated ways of writing, which is just writing within modes, like writing a comparison contrast, writing a definition paper, writing a cause and effect paper. You know, there's not necessarily a right way to teach writing, except for my way, of course. There's not necessarily the proven standard of teaching. And what I believe is that we should think about writing in situations. We should think about writing, the ways that we go about writing, the processes we take. And I think that when we gather together in a class, even though we're not in a classroom, we are gathering online. When we gather together in a class, we should be talking about something similar together. It helps us with our discussion of different themes or different ideas, to have a common point of discussion, so that we're not just saying, here's where you write this paragraph, or here's how you come up with this sentence. Now, many composition teachers teach this course without doing that kind of talk, but I really want to avoid it. I want to avoid it because that kind of standard mode of learning how to write has been pounded in your heads for the past 12 years, or the past 20 years, or the past 40 years. It depends on how old you are. And that standard way of learning how to write, go write a paragraph, and then write 3 other paragraphs, and then write another paragraph. Make sure that your sentences are this long, or make sure your paper has no errors in it. That way of teaching writing has hurt an awful lot of us in the ways that we approach writing and the ways that we feel about writing. So I focus on a theme, and through that theme, we think about situational writing that we might be doing, and not necessarily even about that theme itself, but we use the theme as a way to focus ourselves. This semester, my theme is on protest, and we're going to be thinking about how and why we write with a sense of protest, and what that means, and how the protests around us, how the world around us is demanding a certain kind of voice and a certain kind of action right now. As we walk in the streets and we argue that Black Lives Matter. You know, the phrase Black Lives Matter is not only a phrase for protest or demonstration, it is also an argument. It is a writing, and it's a pretty smart form of writing. It's pretty easy. It's easy to see how it's a form of writing, how it's a form of fighting writing. When you consider the ways that people who would argue against this movement argue, to claim that Black Lives Matter claims that Black lives are worth considering. They do matter. They don't, it's not, nobody would argue that Black lives don't matter. When people argue against this phrase, they want to say all lives matter, or blue lives matter, or my life matters. What they're denying is the right or the possibility that we should focus on Black lives. It is a brilliant piece of writing because in that denial, they are trying to deny this statement, and this statement cannot be denied. In writing, what we're trying to do is establish a claim or establish a meaning and bring our readers along with us in any situation of writing. Whether you're writing uh, a paper for an English 131 course, or you're writing a letter to an editor, or you are writing a job application, or you are writing a text to a friend to convince them to go out, or you are writing a tweet or a Instagram post. Whatever it is that you're writing, you are trying to convince somebody else that what you have to say matters. And I don't mean to tie it in with this, other than to say that this is such a powerful piece of writing because it is undeniable. And people who try to deny it look like fools. Let's talk a little bit about what we're doing right now. You're going to start writing a paper. The assignment has been up on the Moodle page for the past week, and you've been hopefully thinking about it and working towards it so that you can come up with a specific argument about writing in protest. Let's take a look at the assignment. I'm going to go to our Moodle page, share my screen. It looks like I'm on my YouTube page right now, so we will get off that and go over to the Moodle portal. And go to our class. So since I'm opening up our class page, it's worth stopping for a moment and reminding you of a couple of things that you've got to do, a couple of things that you can do, and some things that you should be doing. So here's the first thing. We have this board, Class Talk, and this is a place for you to talk about issues with the course or topics in the course or questions you have. You can use it as a purely functional thing to talk about when is a due date or how many pages that have to be or when are we supposed to have this read by. Or you can use it to actually talk about some of the themes. If the questions that we're asking in the forums aren't getting you where you want to talk to when it comes to talking about protest or Black Lives Matter or whether or not you're out in the streets, then you can talk about them in this place as well. Think of the class talk section as being the hallway before class or the classroom 5 minutes after the class leaves. This is a place to talk. So that's the first thing. The second thing, my office hours. I had a couple of people show up in my Tuesday morning office hours. Nobody showed up this evening in my Wednesday evening office hours. You are welcome to pop in, come and talk to me. Let me know what you need from me, or we can just simply talk. We could talk about your papers, we could talk about your writing, or we could just talk about why Black Lives Matter, or any other thing that you might want to talk about. I don't always have to talk about protests. I've got lots of different interests. I want to point you to a couple other resources and then we'll get into the assignment. The first is the writing handbook from the Purdue Online Writing Lab. In this handbook, you will find a lot of guidance for writing, so don't forget about that. We'll talk about this text in a little while. There's also the Writing Center at Henry Ford College. You have access to the Writing Center at Henry Ford College. And all you have to do is go up here to Student Services and click on Writing Center, and you will be taken to their page, and you can actually schedule an appointment with a respondent right then and there when you go to their page. It's a really helpful thing to do. If you're struggling with this paper or struggling with coming up with ideas, go talk to the Writing Center. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you too, but they will help you out in a different way than I can. Okay. So let's go look at the writing assignment and we'll come back and talk about these readings in just a moment. It's a really important skill for you to learn how to read a writing assignment. And in this assignment, the call to write protest, is is an assignment that you have to read through a few times in order to get. This is not like a high school class where you might have been told by a teacher, okay, class, we're going to write a comparison contrast. I want you to compare peanut butter and jelly to bologna sandwiches or whatever. It's not just something your teacher tells you to go and do, and then you go do it and turn it in. The whole idea of giving you an assignment 3 weeks before it's due is that you are thinking and reflecting and trying to develop ideas that have substance and power. And in order to do that, you need to know what the assignment's asking. So you have to read it carefully. I start the assignment by talking about John Trimber, who is a scholar in composition studies and who comes up with this idea primarily from a textbook, but I think it's a very foundational idea in writing theory. And that is that we are given reason to write. We are given a call to write by the situations that surround us, by the ways that we are being asked to write in our lives. And I start with that idea because this is the call to protest. And for your first writing assignment, I want you to analyze a writing situation you have had in the past where you had to protest, argue, demand, persuade in your writing. That means I'm asking you to think about all the different experiences you've had in the past, and then narrow those down to all the different experiences you've had in the past where you were protesting and arguing about something, and then narrow that down to all the different experiences you've had in the past where you were protesting and arguing, and then you had a call to write. And then from those experiences that are left, out of all that narrowing down, I want you to select one of your experiences and think about why it was meaningful. In doing this, the most common impulse would be to select probably an experience you've had in school, because we do a lot of our writing in school, writing an argumentative paper, writing a speech, writing a letter as an assignment, but you had many more calls to write in your life. You've had many things to protest. And if you just think about all your different experiences, you might have multiple possibilities that come to mind. Any act of writing qualifies here and will contain a writing situation that can be read. And by saying being read, I'm talking about being analyzed. After you've decided on your situation, start to read it by asking yourself some questions. You might, for example, ask, what was your call to engage in conflict? What demands were you made upon you as someone who is taking a stand? Were your readers sympathetic or hostile? What resulted from the situation? What does the situation tell you about conflict, protest, or acts of writing? Focus on trying to make that situation meaningful by analyzing it as a subject, and try to use analytical questions to lead you to a specific meaning about protest or a specific meaning about the call to write. Frankly, it's not on me, particularly in this assignment, for me to tell you what your meaning should be or what kind of meaning you should be developing. What I'm asking you to do is to focus on an experience and to make sure you've got some kind of meaning. And then once you have a meaning, you should be using your experience as evidence for that meaning. Establish some sort of claim about protesting, about writing under pressure, about writing in conflict, about having conflict and why you protest. Focus your claim around something in there, something you want to prove, and then use your experience to prove it. It's a complex assignment, and it's going to take some work to get there. Now, you're going to have to think through lots of different experiences, and then you're going to have to test those experiences and see what's meaningful for you and figure out what you want to say about protests, about writing, about conflict. It's on you. And that's probably the scariest thing here, if an English class can be scary. You are being called to write at this moment. You are being called to produce something at this moment. Now, the stakes aren't terribly high. You're not out there fighting for your lives against a society that sometimes treats those lives as less than important. But you are being called, and you are on the spot, and you do have to create. Let's think about one way that you might do that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a writing exercise here. And what I want you to do is to consider how you would answer some questions. So maybe what we should do is you get a piece of paper and a pen if you don't already have one. And maybe when you watch one of these lectures, you should have one. Maybe you should treat this like the classroom. Get a piece of paper and pen, and we're going to do a writing exercise. What will happen is I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and those questions are designed to help you think about different experiences you've had in writing and protesting and fight right. So I'll wait. Go get your pen, get your pencil, get a piece of paper. Go on, do it. I see you there. Don't pretend like you're doing it and not do it. Go get it. Okay. Presumably you could pause this and then go get it if you need to. I'll wait. Let's do an exercise. So I'm going to give you a number of different questions. And in those questions, I'm going to be asking you about your experiences. What I would like you to do is to write down a sentence or two about each of those experiences. You may come up with something or you may not. You may have an idea, you may not. That's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. Just move on to the next one. Or if you can't think of something, maybe you want to write down a couple of words of reminder of what the prompt was and then go back and try it again. So let's try it out. I want you to think about a time where you wrote a letter to a friend or a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, a lover, where you were trying to persuade them to do something different. Okay. I want you to think of a time when you were in school. Let's go with junior high. Junior high is a really contentious time in our lives. I want you to think of a time when you were in school and a principal or a vice principal, a teacher, a counselor made you write a letter of apology. Okay. Another one. This is a little bit hard for me to do because usually I'm in a classroom when I'm doing this kind of exercise and I can see whether or not people are writing and how they're getting through this. So if you need to pause after I say one of these to give yourself a couple minutes to write something down, great. Pause it, come back. Let's try another one. Think of a time where you wrote a sign that was supposed to have some kind of meaning. Now, it could have been an amazing sign like this, or maybe it was just a sign you put on somebody's locker, a sign that was fighting for something. Next one. I want you to think of a time when you wrote a meme or you created some sort of meme for an online space. Maybe it was a meme. Maybe it was just a Facebook post. Maybe it was just some kind of some kind of simple print that you were doing to make an argument. I want you to think about that. Okay. I want you to think of a time when you were in school or in church or in Boy Scouts or in Girl Scouts or in some kind of public community-based organization when you gathered with other people and talked about protesting something. And in that gathering, you had to do some sort of writing. A time when you were trying to protest with others and you had to do some writing. Okay. How about a time when you got into a Facebook argument or a Instagram argument or a Twitter argument? A time when you were arguing against somebody's ideas or somebody's statements or somebody's ridiculousness. And by this, try to avoid those personal arguments you might have, the petty personal stuff where you talk about somebody as a friend or an ex-friend. Think more about protesting bigger issues. Okay, let's think about a time when you were called into writing some kind of protest that you didn't necessarily feel. A time when somebody was trying to persuade you to be a part of something and you didn't necessarily feel it. You didn't want to protest, or you didn't care about protesting, or you didn't understand why people were protesting, but you just kind of went along with it because somebody was asking you to do it. Okay, let's think of a time when you really, really wanted to protest. You had a call to write. And frankly, I don't know many people who in the past 6 months have not felt some call to protest, something that has stirred within them where they wanted to say something. They wanted to argue and fight against something. The time when you were called to protest, a time when you were called to write, to fight, and you didn't do it. You didn't quite get to that moment of writing. Let's try one more. How about a time when you um, wrote something for protesting or to fight or to persuade, and you ended up not using it or not sharing? Something where you were going to get there and you decided not to. I can keep on going asking these kind of questions, but what I want you to see is that it's through these kind of questions that you can start to generate ideas. You can start to generate possibilities of experiences that you might use as evidence. Now, none of these are necessarily going to lead to a paper. What leads to a paper is when you find one of these experiences and you start to break it down and you start to think about why it's meaningful. And then from that, you start to develop an argument, a point that you want to prove. That's where you start to find the paper. Right now, you're just trying to find an experience. But here's what's often happens, especially on a first paper assignment for people in college. They hear this assignment and they get so stressed out about trying to find something to meet the terms of the assignment that they forget that they still have to find something that they want to write about. They forget about what it is that matters to them, and they just struggle to find something put down on paper. Don't make it a struggle. Break your assignment into little pieces and think about where you want to go with this assignment. You'll get there. This class is on protest because I believe that we all have something we want to fight for. We all have something that is meaningful to us that we feel like we need to tell others about. And I believe that we all have moments of writing in our lives where we get engaged in those fights. Sometimes those fights are very deep and sometimes they're just minor. But it's worth thinking about how is it that we do it in both situations. Sometimes we just want to fight right. I kind of love that phrase, and I just kind of came up with it when I was planning the syllabus stuff this semester. Fight right. And the right there is the WRIT E, but it could be the GHT, if I could learn how to spell. Fight right. Fight in proper ways, fight in effective ways, fight with writing, fight the right, fight with right. There are many ways to think about the phrase, and maybe it's not all that important to get into right now, but you are going to fight right for this paper. At the very least, the paper itself is asking you to focus on that experience. As you begin thinking about where you can go with this assignment, you should go back to our reading too. Why do we protest? Why is that a meaningful thing? And how do we protest in ways that are supportive of each other, that uphold a community, that fight for something that matters? Go back and look at our readings again. Read about the protest in Detroit, which, by the way, has blown up again. The Detroit police have already have started busting people again because people are standing out in the street saying, it's time that we recognize Black Lives Matter. Go out, look at those ratings, think more about your own writing, your own experiences, and what you want to write about, and start your fight right. I will talk to you again next week. In the meantime, don't forget, you have some forums you've got to complete. You have reading notes you've got to complete. And you have those reading assignments that you have to complete before you do the reading notes. I will say, I saw a couple people have already posted their reading notes before even this lecture got up. The lectures have to be part of your reading notes. You need to turn in some notes about what you saw in the lecture, which is why it's a good idea to have a notebook out in front of you. Let me say one other thing about that. There is some talk in the academic world about what is an appropriate length for a video. Don't go over 10 minutes. Don't go over 15 minutes. Students don't have that kind of attention span. I tend to try to keep my videos under 40 minutes. I usually try to keep them under 30 minutes. But sometimes I go a little bit long because we've got a lot of things to talk about. What I want you to consider is that this is the classroom. It's the classroom we have right now. It's not the classroom we wanted. It's the classroom we have. And so while I would much rather have you here with me and we could be talking, I have to get some ideas out to you, and I want you to think about those ideas. I really don't like lecturing like this in a classroom, but sometimes the ideas have to come out. So I want you to pay attention to the lectures. I want you to take notes on the lectures, and I hope they're helpful to you. Go do some work. I will see you next week. Don't forget about office hours. So you can come and talk to me. And I'm always available by email or chat in the IMs. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.